Well, morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when and where you're watching this. Welcome to another Festival in a Box 2.0 session. If this is your first session, then welcome to the event. We hope you're going to enjoy it. If it's not your first one, then welcome back. Anyway, for this session, I've managed to entice Andrew Lennie, or Andy Lennie, Whisky Specialist with Whyte and Mackay, to come and talk to us about the Fettercairn 12-year-old. So I'm going to bring Andy in just now. Good afternoon, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Eddie. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing well and getting better all the time.
Good.
Well, thanks so much for agreeing to come on this recording for us. I'm sure that the viewers at home will really enjoy it. But could you just, obviously I've known you for a few years, so I kind of know where you've been and what you've been doing. But could you fill in the viewers on who you are and what you do with Whyte and Mackay and how you got to be doing it?
Of course, yeah, Eddie, great to see you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure always. My name is Andy. I am a whisky specialist for Whyte and Mackay, and my career in whisky really began as a bartender, actually. I worked in various cocktail bars and whisky bars around Scotland. The first real whisky shrine I worked in was the Whisky Rooms in Edinburgh, which was just an amazing place, which obviously had a library of bottles on the back bar. And that was the first time I think I saw the scale of the Scotch malt whisky industry. After a few years bartending and kind of learning as much as I could about the world of whisky, I did a little bit of work with Talisker. I was an honorary ambassador for Talisker as a result of a cocktail competition which I won in the UK. And then after a year as an honorary ambassador with Talisker and still working in bars, I actually started as the first ambassador at Lindores Abbey Distillery, which is, you can actually see it from the house I grew up in. So that was really lovely. The new Lindores Abbey Distillery, built in 2017 on the old ancient Abbey site, the old 12th century Abbey site. So I worked with Lindores for 2 years on the Aqua Vitae launch, which we put out before the whiskey, or as the whiskey was maturing rather. And after 2 years at Lindores, I was approached by Whyte and Mackay with the opportunity to represent Fettercairn. And at that point, I was thinking about what I knew about Fettercairn already, which wasn't a lot. I remember having a couple of bottles on the back bar when I was at the Whisky Rooms. We had the Fettercairn Fjord at that time and the Fask, I believe. But the new collection of whiskies I hadn't tried. So when they were launched in 2018, I joined the team, and it was just a great opportunity to represent this new collection of whiskies, but from a distillery that already had so many years of whiskey making sort of credentials behind it. And since I joined, which was about 2 years ago, I've been with Whyte and Mackay. We've traveled all over the world introducing new whiskey drinkers and new Fettercairn fans to this new collection. And over the last couple of years, we've really expanded the range from 4 expressions, which we started with, to lots of sort of limited edition experiment, more innovative projects rather. So we have the Fettercairn 16-year-old we launched in 2020. We have another 16-year-old coming out this year, which will be a completely different maturation story. And you might see behind me the Fettercairn Warehouse 2, batch number 1. So that was another limited release whiskey, and batch 2 is on its way very, very soon. But today we're going to talk about the 12-year-old, and that's where it all started for me as well.
Yeah. Hold back on the new stuff, because we'll talk about that later. Don't get too excited just yet. But I don't think I'm right in saying, Fettercairn was never, up until the last 2-3 years, it was never really promoted very heavily, or if at all, really. It was always there or thereabouts, but never really kind of elevated. So it's good to see it's being looked after a bit.
Definitely. I mean, it's been an integral part in the success of many blended whiskies that you'll know. So I always say that most whiskey drinkers will have tasted Fettercairn at some point in time, but probably as a component part to a blend that they've enjoyed. But the story is just so incredible. The Fettercairn story is wonderful. It's a unique production process. It's got 200 years of history as well. And the more I found out about Fettercairn, the more I just couldn't believe that story hadn't been told already. So when the new collection came out in 2018, it was really about doing it justice. And with 200 years of history, we kind of had a legacy that hadn't been written yet. So we want to tell the story in a really contemporary and forward-thinking way, because it's not just about the last 200 years, but about the next 200 years as well, and making sure that we keep Fettercairn going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's hear a bit about that one. I'm just going to pour myself a wee dram of the 12.
Wonderful.
It's a hard job, this, isn't it?
That's tough. It's tough. Yeah.
So, tell us. So, if you can just tell us a little bit about the 12-year-old specifically, and what the makeup of it in terms of
of course,
and maybe some of the flavors that we might find within.
For sure. I'll grab a wee bottle actually and just talk you through it, because everything that, the Fettercairn story, as I mentioned, is really represented on the bottle. The first thing you'll notice is the unicorn. The unicorn is the national animal of Scotland, but it came to Fettercairn with the founder, Sir Alexander Ramsay, and his family crest contained the unicorn. So when they founded the distillery in 1824, they brought with them the unicorn, which is a lovely icon and symbol of Fettercairn. You'll also notice around the neck of the bottle, there's a sort of what is a reference to our copper cooling rings. So this is part of our distillation process, which create a really lovely, unique, tropical, fruity style of whiskey. So hopefully that's something you're going to find when we bottle Fettercairn. What we're looking for is really a celebration of the distillery character we produce. So the new make spirit of Fettercairn is really robust. It's really complex, but there's a lovely malty, banana, pineapple, mango note at its heart. So hopefully with the 12-year-olds, that's what you're going to find. This is a whiskey which has been fully matured in ex-bourbon American white oak casks, and for Fettercairn, that's the perfect partner for our spirit. So most of our whiskies are going to begin their life with that foundation of flavour, and what that's going to hopefully bring in is a lovely honey, vanilla, a little bit of coconut on the nose as well, and just all those things you would expect from ex-bourbon. But what hopefully you'll notice, Eddie, is that the cask hasn't overpowered the spirit, and the spirit character is sort of shining through. So you'll hopefully find pears, apples, but also peaches, nectarines, and that lovely sort of malty pineapple note that I think's the sort of unmistakable Fettercairn note.
Yeah. If anyone at home is struggling to find any of those notes, first of all, don't worry. You'll find your own flavors, but a little drop of water, once you've tasted it without, can actually help bring those flavors to life. So maybe give that a try too.
Absolutely. With the Fettercairn 12-year-old, it is an introduction to the Fettercairn distillery character. It's 40%. It's very much a drinking strength, and actually makes a great highball as well. So if drinking whiskey neat's not your thing, lots of ice, soda, and a little wedge of pink grapefruit in the top is absolutely delicious. But
they're very deadly. Yes, I remember going to Whisky Live in Paris many years ago, and the Nika kind of library, I think it was more like, and they had a bar and they were serving highballs, and I had a couple of them, just wow. Yeah.
It's a lovely way to drink whiskey, and you get all the character, all the flavor, but just with a lighter, more effervescent sort of style of drinking. But of course, it's just as enjoyable neat. Hopefully you're enjoying that, everyone at home, and Eddie yourself as well. It's a lovely kind of aperitif style of whiskey. It's quite a light style. There's no peat, there's no smoke in this at all. It's very light. There's that lovely tropical fruit note, and then it just develops into sort of soft spice on the end. Again, that soft spice is definitely something like a signature flavour that you'll find in most of the Fettercairn whiskies.
Yes. I get a little bit of like apple tartatin or something, just like caramelized apple. It's lovely.
So I mentioned just a little bit before that on the bottle you'll see a reference to our spirit stills, and hopefully we can share with you a little video of the spirit stills just now, because it's them that are incredibly unique at Fettercairn. This is the only distillery in Scotland where you'll see copper cooling rings fitted around the top of the spirit stills, and we drenched them with cold water from the outside. And that was a little innovation from the 1950s. And it was introduced by the distillery manager at the time, who was called Alistair Menzies. And I guess this was his way of actually lightening up and freshening our spirit, which would have been very typically Highland at that point. Just a short video, it's only 7 seconds, but it's a really nice glimpse of what you'll expect if you visit the distillery.
It's one of the best 7 seconds of my life, Andy.
Thanks. But this is great because there's lots of ways that you can create a lighter style of spirit. But Fettercairn's it's almost 200 years old. So if you think about the 1950s, if they wanted to change everything to create a lighter style of spirit, it would cost loads and loads and loads of pounds to do that. But I think what's happened here is someone was telling me, it was actually our head of distillation, Shane at Whyte and Mackay, who was saying that they used to have hoses, and they would perforate holes in the hoses and wrap them around casks when it was particularly warm. And that was just a way of keeping the casks moist and making sure they didn't leak. So if you imagine that hose just flooding the casks with cold water, I think that's what they've done. They've maybe taken those hoses, they've wrapped them around the stills, and they've seen that the spirit character has gone from being very biscuity, very malty and quite heavy, that a little bit lighter, that lovely tropical fruit note starting to come through. And although we have a new collection of whiskies, not much has changed over the years at Fettercairn, and that's something I think is absolutely wonderful. Today we're still trying to capture the essence of the spirit that was really brought to life in the 1950s. Our distillery manager today is Stuart Walker, who's actually been at the distillery for 31 years. And was recently awarded the Distillery Manager of the Year award last year, which was phenomenal. So a great person, and this is something he's very passionate about, is just keeping that consistency of spirit alive. And every bottle of Fettercairn should hopefully have that lovely tropical indication. It's just great because it's language you don't hear often in whiskey, is it? Talking about mangoes and bananas, passion fruit, things like that. It's a lovely place to be.
Absolutely. Now, I was going to ask you about any particular quirks to the production process, but obviously you've already kind of shown us the money, as it were. Is there anything else that you guys do that is perhaps slightly unusual?
I think so, yeah. So, as I say, with a 200-year-old distillery, something I always talk to Stuart Walker, our distillery manager, about is that when he came in 1990, you really inherit what's been left behind by the previous whiskey makers. And obviously there's been this kind of handing over of the baton across the years. But the first thing you'll notice, or sort of the first part of the process, is our mash tun. And the mash tun at Fettercairn is an old Victorian cast iron mash tun. It came into Fettercairn from a silent distillery called Glenugie, which was up in Peterhead, and it was installed at Fettercairn. It's one of only 3 old Victorian mash tuns still operating in the industry. And what that would typically give you flavour-wise would be a very biscuity, rich style of spirit, because that's because we produce a cloudy wort. So our kind of barley sugar water is very cloudy. And if you take that through to fermentation and through to the stills, some of those solids will maybe burn in the stills and will give you a lovely kind of biscuity flavour. But that idiosyncratic process, the cooling ring around the spirit stills sort of combats that a little bit. So some of it's carried through, but a lot of it is stripped out with these lovely cooling rings. One thing I would say is that between the mash tun, the stills, and then our beautiful tun room where we have 11 wooden washbacks, there's just so many sights, sounds, and smells. And the tun room's got to be one of my favourite places at the distillery. When you walk in, there's a lovely sort of banana bread smell. And that comes from, of course, the beer sort of bubbling away, fermentation taking place. But also the simple fact that we have 11 Oregon pine washbacks, which are treated with linseed oil. And the smell of linseed oil is absolutely beautiful. So those things kind of come hand in hand, and it's just a lovely smell. And then at the end of the tun room, we've got these big bay windows that look out over the Cairngorm Mountains and over our water source that provides the cooling water for our spirit stills. So there's loads going on, but definitely the focal point is these spirit stills. And anytime I've had visitors at the distillery, their eyes just fixate on them. And it's absolutely wonderful to see. And of course, it really is the embodiment of the spirit that's in the bottle as well. That's what creates this unique flavour.
Well, it's always good to have a water feature.
Yeah. I mean, there's no shortage of water in that part of the world. It rains most of the time. There's loads coming in off the Cairngorms, and yeah.
I meant an indoor water feature, but that's okay.
Well, that's true.
No, but one that functions has a primary function of actually helping you achieve the spirit weight that you want. It's quite remarkable. I don't think does anyone else use that method at all that you know of, or?
Not that exact way. There's lots of different cooling jackets you'll see in the industry and things like that. At Dalmore, we actually have internal water jackets, which is like a condenser in the neck of the still, but it's not really on display. What I found just fascinating the first time I went into Fettercairn was the fact that the neck of the stills are black, and they've got this lovely sort of patina kind of verdigris color on them as well, which is just the water, and the copper coming in contact. But as you say, it's like a water feature. It's quite therapeutic to see it. The water's falling down, the steam's rising, and then all the smells of distillation happening around you. It's pretty special.
Have you thought about doing massage sessions in there or something? It's very relaxing.
Not personally, maybe as a visitor, I would accept that experience. But
good stuff. Now you alluded to some future bottlings that we should keep an eye out for, but maybe you'd like to elaborate a little bit on that, and what other future plans there might be for the distillery and the brand.
Of course, as I say, there's so much of it is inspired by our history. And Fettercairn's in part of the world called the Garden of Scotland, and it is known as that because it's surrounded by our agriculture. There's so many barley farmers and barley fields around us. So that's something we want to kind of hold close to us as we go forward. We want to look after the community of farmers around us as well. We also have a real treasure trove of flavour and rare and aged stocks in our warehouses. And all 14 of those warehouses are traditional dunnage in style. So the casks are never more than 3 high. And that's just a wonderful environment for a consistent humidity and consistent temperature. So we've got some old world style casks in there, if you will. So for working with some great bodegas and port lodges and things like that. But our whiskey maker, Mr. Greg Glass, who's really leading the portfolio as we move forward, he has some really cool innovative casks that we've laid down in our warehouses. So working with Scottish rum producers, Scottish beer producers. He's even working with lots of Scottish oak as well. Some coming from wind-felled trees from the Fask estate where the distillery sits. And that's all about just using what we have to hand and seeing what we can do and what impact that has on flavour. As we've talked about, the main thing with Fettercairn is that lovely tropical fruit house style. But using different cask types and different recipes can obviously take that down different side roads. The first sort of project, or the most recent project, is the Warehouse 2 bottling, which I have just here. And this was part of a bit of analysis that Greg's leading on, and that's to see, what is the difference between one warehouse to another? What impact does that have on flavour? If you have a cask sitting in Warehouse 2, for example, which is one of the original dunnage warehouses from when the distillery was built, if you have a cask maturing there, what difference does that have to having it mature in one of the more modern warehouses or one of the newer warehouses? And there's lots of little points of difference that you'll notice, but when you walk into a warehouse like number 2, it's old, it's damp, it's got lovely sort of chocolatey, mushroomy smells. And these are just incredible places. So Warehouse 2 series that we're working on, that's really going to celebrate casks that have been matured for their full life in that environment. The next batch of Warehouse 2 is coming out in a couple of months' time. And again, that's going to be a lovely recipe, which is all going to be detailed on the bottle. So full transparency and all that sort of good stuff. And as I say, moving forward, we're working on some Scottish oak projects as well, which hopefully you'll hear a lot more about going forward. But this is a project that Greg's been working on for many years. Even before he joined Whyte and Mackay, he had this aspiration to sort of develop a Scottish oak programme, which benefits the wider industry. So that's something that we're really excited to kind of see how it progresses.
Absolutely. And we're very excited to see it, and hopefully we can do that live at some point with real people.
Absolutely.
I think that's what we all want. Lots of people and lots of whiskey. Definitely.
It's been missed 100% over the last sort of year and a while, because it's just that missing sort of ingredient that makes whiskey so special. It's just
yes, exactly. But we're light at the end of the tunnel, I think.
Of course.
Now, just before we finish, Andy, and from a personal point of view, because you've been in the industry long enough now to form many opinions, I'm sure. What's your take on the current state of play in the global whiskey industry? Are there things that are happening that are really exciting or impressing you? Are there any matters for concern? What's your feeling at the moment?
I think it's really exciting. It's there's just so many distilleries kind of popping up all over the world, and certainly being involved with Lindores, which was obviously a brand new distillery, family run. They just had a real vision of what they wanted to do, and you can see it happening across the world. Something I've always loved is sort of world whiskey, and how different countries sort of interpret their local ingredients to create special whiskies. So the Stauning distillery in Denmark's one that I find absolutely fascinating. My brother used to live in Finland as well, so Terempeli distillery was a distillery where, which I've tried a few of their whiskies, and it's just really lovely to see how these smaller countries interpret something that well, we have hundreds of distilleries, over 150 distilleries in Scotland now as well. So I think in terms of flavor diversity, there's so much to be celebrated in the world of whiskey. And another issue which is being tackled sort of quite rightly at the moment is just the idea of diversity in terms of whiskey's audience, and breaking down those barriers and making sure that the whiskey industry is a place where everyone is welcome, and we are celebrating a diversity of people and flavor. So that's something that, of course, with being an ambassador for a whiskey distillery is really important. So hopefully everyone who's got a glass of Fettercairn 12 in front of them today is enjoying it, and play around with it and celebrate flavor, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, I think universally most people are very positive about the current state of play in the whiskey industry. I think if I think back to when I started drinking whiskey and learning about whiskey, it was really all Scotch, with the Japanese stuff just starting to come through. So we had things like Yamazaki and Hakushu, and I think Sekinder at the Whiskey Exchange was starting to bring in the Nika, Yoichi and Miyagi-Kyo. But now you look around and you look online and in the various whiskey specialists, and it's just incredible to see the diversity and the range of flavors, and it's just bewildering. I think it's such a good time to be in whiskey, whether you're new to whiskey or whether you've been in it for a few years.
I agree. I think things like this are absolutely brilliant as well, because there is so much to experience and sort of discover. So if you're looking to find the first whiskey to enjoy, things like this are great, because there's no barriers there to just get involved and just listen in and try something a little bit new. So I guess that's one of the perks to the sort of virtual element that we've all been kind of thrown into over the last year, is that anyone can join from all over the world, and you're not sacrificing money before you're not buying a bottle that's not going to be for you,
and you're not having to pay for the taxi fare home.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, there are some.
Do miss the after parties though, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. I mean, there are some perks to the online stuff, but on balance, I think almost everyone anyway, would rather be in person when it's safe to do so, and we will be doing that. I can promise you that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Andy, listen, it's been lovely to see you again. Sorry it's been so long. My wish, and I will make it happen, is that we'll get together in the not too distant for a beer and a dram. Love to come to Fettercairn as well at some point, and maybe have a massage.
I'll try and find someone for that for you. Eddie, I can't promise it'll be me. But it's been great. It's been great chatting with you, and when the distillery reopens again, which will hopefully be maybe next year at this point, but it'll be great to have you and have anyone who wants to come and visit Fettercairn and see the stills for themselves and sort of get involved. Actually, sorry, I meant to ask: is the distillery open for visitors normally? Yeah, absolutely. And we were undergoing quite a big renovation in our visitor centre as well, and just creating a lovely sort of experience which celebrates all the things we've talked about today. Mm-hmm. Getting into the warehouses, having the opportunity to sort of cask sample, things like that. Having a tasting room where we can play around with little flavour pairings and and some of those tropical fruit notes, kind of bring them to life through that sort of experience. But at the moment, it's looking like next year. But
right, okay.
Whiskey is a patient game at the best of times. So
absolutely. Well, I suspect that there will be many staycationers still amongst us, next year and going forward. So I suspect that visitor numbers to Scotch distilleries and distilleries around the rest of the UK will go up and up and up. Hopefully, yes. But Andy, listen, thank you so much for coming on. It's really lovely to see you, and thank you for presenting the Fettercairn 12-year-old. Certainly taught me one or two things, and it's a delicious midday dram.
Absolutely.
Possibly even earlier. You could almost say a breakfast dram. But that's great. So I shall say Sláinte, and
thank you very much, and we'll catch up soon.
Absolutely. Thanks to the viewers at home. Hope you've enjoyed the session. Now go and do another one.
Thank you. Cheers. Sláinte.